Hi, I'm Jack Berkowitz. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Security. We're a software company that specializes in data privacy, data security, and now the emerging world of generative AI and AI governance, privacy, and control. And with me today is Dimple Thakkar. Dimple is the head of data for machine learning and intelligence operations at JP Morgan Chase. And Dimple, welcome. Super excited to have you here because we're going to dive deep into data and AI, which is sort of where my career is and what I enjoy talking about. So, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jack. Hi, everybody. Excited to be here likewise.
So, before we get going, why don't you just explain to everybody sort of what your team does or what you're interested in and sort of give everybody for a feel as to where you're focused these days.
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. We within the firm and within the financial services industry, there is, like you said, a lot of focus right now on data being the heart of not only M&AI, but also data being the heart of everything we run in terms of reporting, dashboards, and being able to track right from the economy to financial services and customer experiences. We announced the head of data roles a couple of years back, where we wanted to have data, like I said, at the heart of our customer experience across channels. And for financial services and banking, that becomes a key. So my team here at the firm helps determine all of the complicated data sources, all of the joins that we need to do, all of the governance aspects of how long we need to store the data for. So we work and partner very closely with our engineering and architecture groups, but also work extremely closely with our design and product with respect to a quad formation, where my team heads and leads all of the data aspects there, but we work very closely with our product and design partners to ensure that data sits right in the middle of all of the customer experiences that we build across channels. And Customer 360 has been the biggest financial services hurdle. I know a lot of large companies have been trying to solve it. And so we understand, as JP Morgan, we understand the importance of data, and we announced these roles a couple of years back, and that's what my team helps with. We call it four pillars. One is determining the data movement. Second is data governance. Third is we delve deep into any of the new systems that get generated and that get stood up, and how that experience looks like with respect to data. And then we also do a lot of course, like you said, ML and AI that sits as an enabler on top of these experiences.
That's awesome. So when you think about that, right? I'm a customer of a bank. I am a consumer, right? But I'm also, I need you to have my private financial information. In my past, I was in the HR and payroll industry, right? We'd always find ourselves in this interesting balance between consumer rights and, me serving you. So are permissions different when you think about for the opt-in for consumers versus what you need to do for the bank versus what you need to do for regulatory compliance? And how do you manage that as you go?
That's a fabulous question, Jack. So there are a couple of things there. The top three things that come to mind. One is, yes, the way we govern customer data is extremely detailed. So, for instance, there might be a customer consent on things like whether you prefer as a customer an email versus you prefer a notification on your text on directly your device versus somebody who wants to come to the branch. And so all of these three aspects have different regulatory treatments in terms of how we handle our customer data. So that's where the uniqueness of data governance comes into play, because now it's no more just data governance for the sake of data governance. It is fueling these experiences, and when every single personalized experience is different for every client. So, for instance, an aged client might not want anything on their device. They might want to come into the branch, meet with an advisor, and talk through their personalized experiences. Whereas somebody like you and me, Jack, would want things on their digital device and can avail of the application for our experiences, because we have just 2 minutes to kind of browse through our accounts. So the governance aspect is now no longer just getting a tick and an approval mark, but it's going a lot deeper in terms of what we're seeing right from the White House all the way to banking institutions is how do we make this data governance a crux in terms of, and how do we keep these governance aspects very, very personalized for every customer. The second important thing there is, as a financial services institution, there is a heavy lift in terms of governance and audits, specifically on some of the newer tools and AI related experiences that we're all wanting to work on, right? As a banking institution. And I know there is a lot of talk in the industry right now. I get asked when I speak at events all the time, is like, oh, Dimple, what are you guys doing about governance? And LLM governance is a big deal right now. So all of that governance and all of the regulation for that is completely different. In my last keynote, Europe is a little ahead in terms of they do have their LLM governance already in place. US, we are still working on it just because the varied nature of our customer consent, like you brought up earlier. So yes, very different in terms of regulation, very different in terms of what the next stage of data governance and what we are evolving into, what we are getting into in terms of just various personalized experiences. And remember, every time we build a personalized experience for a customer, that regulation we need to go through like every single contract. Not only that, but how we store data and how we share that data, how we redact, how we tokenize that data also falls into place. So yes, we are very, very strong, stringent, I would say, in terms of where financial services regulations
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. So, it implies, right, the carrying of the permission with the data element, not stored someplace separate, but actually with that data element, because that data element could be used in multiple places, and each application of it is going to have a different interpretation. So you need to keep those two things together. So let me ask you then, really, the question I have in my mind is how are you then thinking about, okay, that's easy if I have a piece of structured data, maybe not easy, but we've thought about it. We've been doing this for 15 years about how to build structured data provenance systems. And now all of a sudden it's unstructured data and it's documents. And everybody used to do documents and document them 20 years ago, but now it's just all sitting in Office 365 or in SharePoint or in some shared drive someplace. What's the implication about how do you do that security or that governance with the unstructured? And then what are you seeing in the financial industry specifically about regulations going that way?
Yeah. So that's again a great point of discussion. So the first thing there, in terms of unstructured data, you're right. There is no format, right? When we talk about various documents, various timestamps, things that people talk, and for financial services, for us, I'll tell you, it becomes a critical point because not only from a management perspective and how we regulate it, but also how this unstructured data is stored and transmitted through the systems. So when we talk about data, there are three different aspects. One is data that's on the surface and what's shown on the front end or UI. The second is data that's transient. So there might be data that we might be getting from a particular system and just passing through a platform. And then third is the retention of data, which is the backend storage of data. So these three are the phases in terms of how we look at data and how we define governance for each of those data elements and data sets. And for unstructured data, those become critical for us. So for instance, the way we regulate it is where I may be able to store data in an encrypted manner for a couple of years. For audit reasons, we need to do that. But when I pass that same unstructured data through a transient system, that becomes a whole new ballgame altogether.
Yeah,
Because
like going to a vector database, right?
exactly,
All of a sudden you've created a copy of that data. That vector database may or may not be inside of the financial institution's control, right?
exactly.
Another controller, yeah.
Yeah, and now you're transforming that data. You're taking that transient data and you're doing something with it, whether it's a model or whether it's a rule that you're creating, etc. So I think that becomes critical for unstructured data. So that's how we're looking at it, and that's why that detailed regulation and governance becomes critical for us. The second point that you brought up, Jack, is interesting as well. Is where I'm looking in the next 5 years, and as I'm telling this to my son, the data governance as well as the AI regulation industry in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, is going to gain a lot more traction just because we are seeing so many new aspects every single hour, not
Yeah.
just every single hour. There's a new LLM every single hour. And we are seeing the likes of all of the large non-financial tech institutions. Microsoft, I know Apple is putting in more money into their Siri and into AI. We all have to evolve. And as a result of that, there'll be a lot of changes and shifts that I'm envisioning in the next 5 years, specifically for financial services, where AI is concerned. And that's a well known fact. But I also feel that the way we will be able to mold customer experiences and personalize experiences, all of that combined with the whole LLM and all of the language models that are coming into play, we'll need a lot more stringent and stricter regulation. At the same time, trying to balance the customer experiences. That's going to be our hardest thing in the next 5 years, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just get to one sort of key question, right? So you've been working in customer experience. Customers are going to have expectations, but then everybody else is all talking about agents now, right? That the customers, right? If you look at what Apple Intelligence really announced, the Apple capability, it was, hey, I'm going to go be able to book me a trip, but in context, it's going to understand the context because it's in the device, right? Um, how are you thinking about that in terms of the data? Is it in the device? Do you share it? Do you see what I mean? Because as a consumer,
Yeah.
why I don't want a disconnected experience from my, I'm just looking at my desk right now, my iPhone, my MacBook, and my iPad, right? I want the context of my bank right there with me. How is this going to happen? Is that what these AI computers are?
Yeah. So there are two different lenses that we can look at it. One is we sitting on the financial services side, right, being the guardians of data. So if I look at it from that lens, of course, with that balance thing that we just spoke about becomes critical. At the same time, I want to be able to, from a data perspective, leave it open enough such that my design and product partners are able to curate and personalize that experience for my client and for our customers, right? Which means that depending on their preference, if somebody has said, okay, send me an email instead, we need to look at that on the digital profile and curate that experience. So I need to be able to share that kind of data, but at the same time, not open up their whole card number, for instance, right? So that's where that very thin line comes into play if we look at it from a data steward and a header data kind of an experience. Sitting on the other side of this, if you're right, if I'm a customer, I would want to see my connected experiences across not only devices, and I know Apple is good at that just because we've worked with Apple. My husband worked with Apple for a long time, so we know how serious they are in terms of security, but not all hardware. We as software folks, we cannot have access to privacy on the hardware side. So while we are able to implement agents or ML or AI in terms of the customer experiences, we need to be very, very careful on what data we can share. From a financial services perspective, I will tell you personally, we do not share any data across browsers, cookies, except so if you're using our application or chase.com, it's not shared absolutely because it's your financial data. So those regulations, again, linking back to your regulation point, Jack, those become critical for us because we get audited on the smallest of the things that you can never think of. That's how regulated our financial services industry is. And keeping that balance with the customer experience right now is the biggest challenge. But you're right. We are trying extremely hard to make sure that our customer experiences are omni-channel. So when somebody goes and looks at your application, that person, our customer, is getting the exact same experience of calling us within our call center.
Yeah.
And from a data game real time perspective, that's our biggest challenge right now in being able to stitch through your complete family accounts, what products you own with us, and providing all of that context within the call. So we are, coming back to your question, we are extremely regulated in terms of how we can use our data. We get audited like every single month. We're in on scrutiny, but at the same time, we're trying to do our best in terms of curating the omni-channel experience for our customers, and we're doing
Yeah.
phenomenally good in terms of our app. overall. But there's some
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, probably 10 years ago, back when I was at Oracle, we had started this program, which was this notion, hey, I could get an ad on my phone and I could go into the bank or I could go into the store. And I think we used Yoga Jane as an example, and they would know, right? And here we are. We're just now at the essence of getting that technology, but boy, the regulations are there. You know what? This has been a great discussion. I'm going to cut it short because our viewers are busy. But thank you. This has been a wonderful discussion, Dimple, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jack. This was phenomenal. Appreciate all of the kind words, and I agree. It was a great discussion, and hopefully, this gives our viewers a little more foray into what's coming next.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.